Howdy once more, it's tubalcain, and this is tips number 358, which is part 9 of the small toolmaker's VISE video. And this is the concluding part where I intend to put the bluing on it, but I'm also going to talk about a few other things because it's in fact 2 weeks since I finished this, and I've been gone on a carnival cruise, a wonderful experience, but yet that's another story. But I'm back in my shop, refreshed and ready to work and full of ideas. And I've had a lot of comments on this, and so I'll try to answer some of those. But why don't I start out here by telling you some other sources from which you can buy the steel stock to make this if you're interested. I told you about one, but viewers have told me about 3 others. I can't vouch for them, but let me show you their websites and the names. So let's go on up to the computer for just a minute and take a look at that. I'm at my computer now, and these are screenshots, so I hope this works out all right. The first one here, recommended by other people, is Metal Supermarkets, and they call themselves the convenience stores for metals. And they have 75 locations. The second one here is called Online Metals, Custom Metal and Plastic Supply, and I'm not giving you the web address, but just do a Google search and you can find all of these easily enough. And apparently you can get any size, any type of metal you want here, and we're more interested in steel, so here's cold roll steel. Give that a shot. The third one here is Hobby Metal Kits, and of course that's the one that I have talked about. That's the one that I ordered from. Hobby Metal Kits are out of Wisconsin. Good service. And finally, Speedy Metals, and I don't know where they're out of, but they're an online industrial metal supply, and all types of metals, plastics, and so on. And here you can see that they have pipe and sheet and square and rod and all of that. So check those out if you're in need of steel for your projects. I hope that was helpful to you to determine where to purchase your steel stock. I'm sure there are many others. I'm not going to go back and tell you any more. Be sure and read the comments on all my videos. There's excellent information where people are bouncing around between each other and what I have said. So check those out and go back and recheck them from time to time as new comments come in. Watch my future video, which will be on the making of this bell center punch. That's not done yet. As a matter of fact, I haven't started it other than to make the prototype, but that'll be a several part video as well with drawings by Tolly. And thank you, Tolly, again. And he had just told me by way of email, I've never met Tolly, that he's already had hundreds of requests for the drawings, and they come from all parts of the world. Borneo and just places I didn't think even had electricity. So I think I found that, or I know I found that very interesting as well. Now, a couple other things I wanted to do here, and some of you were surprised that there was so much stress in cold roll steel, because again, the steel, what we mean by cold roll steel, it goes through the rollers in the steel mill and taken down to size while it is cold rather than red hot. That just creates that tension that I talked about that you do not have in hot roll steel, but hot roll steel, well, that's another story. And I know you won't have tool steel to make this out of, because I didn't either. So again, it can be normalized or annealed to remove that, but that's another process, and most of you don't have furnaces to do that, nor do I, decent furnaces at least, that are well controlled. And when you do that, when you heat your metal up red hot, you get that scaling. And that's something that I do not like to deal with, because you know it's nice and smooth and shiny now, and I hate to take that away, and so I have not done that. I'm working with the stresses, and I talked about that in the other videos, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Some of you mentioned that castings that are made typically for engine blocks and that are often cast up at a foundry, put out in their storage yard for a long time, 6 months or more, and they call this seasoning, and that reduces the stresses in castings where they might, let's say, machine a engine block very precisely, and then as it continues to season itself, the dimensions change. So I don't know a whole lot about that, but that's different, but yet somewhat similar to what I'm talking about here. I've been using my new Mitutoyo micrometer in some of the videos, and I've had some comments to people, and one guy seemed rather shocked, and I guess I am too. This must have been a very expensive micrometer new. I paid 50 bucks for it used with a dead battery as shown in another video, but this micrometer reads not just to the thousandth, and not just to the tenth of a thousandth, but to the hundredth of a thousandth, as indicated right here. This is a Mitutoyo. The name is covered by the clamp here, but looking at the readout here, covering up 2 decimal places, that's 547 thousandths, and then we can carry that out to a tenth of a thousandth, or even a hundredth of a thousandth. I will never do that. In fact, this is going to be a little bit annoying to me because, let's face it, I don't work any closer than that, and sometimes I can't even get that, and I bet you can't either. But this was, again, originally bought from Caterpillar. I showed you the receipt for that. The man died. I bought it at a sale, and when I worked at Caterpillar, the same plant where this was purchased, this is a part for a fuel injector out of a Ford Power Stroke. But these were ground after they were hardened, but it was in metric, and this can be, let's see, does this go metric? I'm sure it does. Yeah, or they wouldn't have it at Caterpillar. Everything was metric there. You know, some people say, how come you gringos don't use metric? Well, they do in these big plants. But all of these parts were held to such close tolerances. I had never envisioned those tolerances when I was a teacher of what they did at Caterpillar and how important it was in a precision device like a fuel injector. So I know I got a little bit off topic there, but that's all about the accuracy of this micrometer, and it's far more accurate than what I need. But I'm going to use it anyway. I might put tape over those last decimal places so I don't confuse myself. You know, I'm not nearly as smart as some of you people think I am. I'm just an average guy. And you say, well, you had 40 years experience. Well, not really. I had 1 year of experience in teaching 40 times. Okay, I was going to take this original Starrett vise here and show you how accurately it is made with the dial indicator. And this would have been case hardened, and I made sure I cleaned this here, and I did that by doing just a little bit of this, but I was very hesitant to do this and take off the beautiful case hardening, but it's reasonably clean, and the black granite is clean. And then by putting the Starrett last word indicator on there, if you will, and I'm sure you will, and set this to 0, and you know what, these dials always glare so much in the fluorescent light, but running this from one end of the vise to the other, you can see that it's within a 1/2 thousandth, or let me zero it out and go back the other way now. It's within a 1/2 thousandth. Now it changed just a little bit here in the middle, but that would have been ground, so it's very accurately made. But since it's a Starrett, you would expect it to be. Now let me take some of the same measurements, or check some of the same, I don't know what to call it, on my homemade one. Alright, here's the one I made in the first 8 parts. Wipe that off good and clean. Remember, I machined that all at once. And somebody was very concerned about the dimensions here and here after I had machined this, that changing. Well, remember, I came back and I cleaned this off too, so that trued that up. And I'll prove that right now. Do you have a little beauty like this surface gauge? This is a shear Tomiko coupled here with a last word indicator. And I'll zero it out as such. Now as I move it down from one end to the other, no change there at all. Now what happened right there? Right there it went off by a couple thousandths. Let me go over here and see what happens. I'll zero it out. So I'm within 2 thousandths, not as close as I thought it would be. I'm going to take the jaw out and do that again. See if it makes any difference. The jaw is not in there now, and it made no difference. There is 2 thousandths difference from one end to the other. Now that could have been caused by me being careless. Remember, I had that in the milling machine on a parallel. If the parallel wasn't accurate, or there was a chip under there, or whatever, or I didn't tap it down firmly, maybe it wasn't in the vise and I took more off, 2 thousandths more off of one end than the other. You know, a lot of different ways that could have happened. My milling machine vise could have been inaccurate. That's why it would be nice to surface grind this, and some of you were surprised I do not have a surface grinder, but remember, my shop here is 15 by 18 feet. There's just no room, nor could I get a surface grinder down the basement, nor do I want one anymore. You know, some of my wants have gone away. So that I was a little bit off there. Will that hurt? No. 2 thousandths, remember, that's a hair, one human hair. Now I've reset the indicator and I'm going to check from one end here to the other. So it's on 0. And there was no deviation there. I'm surprised it doesn't have a little indication as it hits the milling marks as I go across, because that's not ground, but that's right on spot, isn't it? I'm kind of surprised at that. Okay, I was just going to show you here some of the different measurements that you can take, you know, to check your work, to see how accurately you have done it. And that's enough on that, because it is what it is. I know I'm rambling and I'm telling you a bunch of things that are in response to comments, but as far as buying Starrett products and so on, I told you I love the sight of a Starrett box, and one guy in a comment says he likes to go garage sailing too, and he says, I can see a Starrett box sitting on a table in somebody's driveway clear from my car as I'm rolling by at 5 miles an hour. So, and it makes your heart thump to just see that box. But then sometimes you come up to the garage sale and there's the box, and some lady has buttons in there that she's selling. She's just using the box. What a disappointment. Almost makes you weep. But I wanted to talk about milling this again, and using this type of milling cutter in a horizontal mill really is a wonderful way to mill something like this out. Preferable to me to end mills, because it doesn't deflect. And in fact, when they manufacture vices such as this one, they would do gang milling. And gang milling means they would have 3 or more milling cutters ganged up like this. There'd be yet another one on the other side, so that as they mill this slot here, they're milling both the narrow and the slot on each side, all in one pass. And I've seen that done in videos and in factory. It's pretty fun to watch, because they very accurately make those 2 slots in one pass on a big powerful milling machine in 1 minute or 2 minutes, and sometimes they're doing several of these at a time in a row. Okay, I'm finally getting down to the business at hand here of putting the bluing finish on the little vise. And if you haven't seen tips number 277, where I put the gun bluing on the Toolmaker's clamp, you can look at that, because there'll probably be more detail in that old video than what I'm going to give you here, because it's really the exact same process. And look at the different items that I have here. I got hot water, I've got empty cups, I got rubbing alcohol, I've got the Birchwood Casey Perma Blue, which you can buy at Walmart or Bass Pro Shop for about $10 or $12. The cotton swabs and the cotton balls, these do leave lint. They're a little bit problematic. I've cleaned already with brake cleaner. You can also clean with hot water and detergents. Cleanliness is of the utmost importance. And they've already been cleaned once, but I'm going to clean them with alcohol as recommended by Birchwood. I've got cotton swab. I guess it's cotton. I don't know where, Tandy leather I think that came from. And some containers here. Where's my little test tube? Right here to do the screw. So that's what you need. Wear the gloves. I may not, but you ought to wear the gloves and do as I say, not as I do. If you look on here, this stuff will kill you. Danger, poison, corrosive, may be fatal. So, not for children. Alright, ready to go. I got to turn the compressor off. Okay, I'm going to tackle the movable jaw first, and I've just got it held on a bolt here just so I have a handle. And this is alcohol, rubbing alcohol. And remember, this has already been cleaned by that brake cleaner, and you can use other kinds of solvents, I guess. And now I'm going to wipe it. And it seems like however many times I wipe it, see the lint from this? That there's always a little bit of dirt, or discoloration I should say. Now make sure that all of the alcohol is dried off, and then I'm ready to start bluing, and I put some of the bluing, which is slightly blue in color, into a little 3-ounce Dixie cup here, and now I'm ready to start the coloring. And it's better off, I think, that you do one piece at a time. Here we go. I suppose I can even dip that a little bit. I believe I will. Yeah, that's better than the swab on these small pieces. There's already some dirt in there. By dirt, I don't really mean dirt, but now this needs several minutes. A big old piece of lint on there. Several minutes to work. And I could care less about the bottom side. Perhaps 2 or 3 minutes. And then I'm going to rinse it in this warm water. Alright, it's been 3 or 4 minutes. Now I'm immediately going to rinse this in this warm water. Try to stop the reaction. Then I'm going to step over to my compressor and blow it off. After blowing it off, I immediately put some stearin oil on there, and I guess you can use about any kind of oil. And I'm rubbing it in real good. Otherwise you'll probably get flash rust almost immediately. And the piece is warm from putting in the warm water. I think it'd be fine to dip this in oil if you had oil in that quantity. Maybe it could even be regular motor oil. I do not know. They're going to tell you to use only Birchwood Casey, of course, on the directions. Okay, That being done, and now my hands are contaminated, your gloves will be too, but I've already cleaned the screw and the handle in alcohol, and I'm going to dip those pieces, but I got to stop and wash up a little bit. Even with clean washed hands, you cannot touch anything that you've already cleaned with alcohol and is ready to blue, so have some way of picking it up, or grab it by a surface that doesn't matter. For instance, I could care less about that part of the screw, and I need to dry this off now, and then I'm going to dip it. Same thing with the handle, because there is alcohol on it yet. It takes just a moment for that to evaporate. No good way to hold on to that little handle. I'm sure Mrs. Peterson won't care that I'm using one of my handkerchiefs to hold on to this, but I noticed right there on the knurl, see that little tiny white mark? Well, that's white paint. Remember when I put that on a long time ago? Well, that's not going to take bluing, but you know, I'm not going to worry about tiny little details like that right now. If this is dry, I'll drop the handle in, I want to put it back in the alcohol. In the bluing. When you look at some products that are blued, for instance this, that's Shars. What a nice job of coloring that is. But they're doing it in a factory under laboratory conditions where they have a department that does nothing but that, and they get pretty good at it, and they would have the best chemicals. So I'll just leave that in there for 2 or 3 minutes and then repeat the washing and the oiling. And if I've got this dry enough, I hope I do, I want to put this end in there, the knurled end. Immediately you can see that white paint, just as I predicted. Some prediction. I was a champion of the obvious. Now I poured the bluing out of the Dixie cup into the graduated cylinder and am reversing the screw and dipping it. Oh, I put too much in there. I must not know much about displacement. Now there's not enough. Could I find a happy medium at all? Let that set a while. Okay, that's been washed off and it is warm and immediately starts turning a funny yellowish color. I hope I can resolve that. I'm going to have to use a lot of oil on this and then wipe off the excess so it gets down into the threads. I think it's alright except for that white paint. Alright, I'll wipe that later, put it over there with the finished pieces. You know, I should have used a dark background here because the white paper reflects the light and causes problems photographically. Oh well. Now I'm ready to work on that. But again, I got oil on my hands. I'm holding the vise body with a fine thread bolt, 5/16 of course. Remember, if you have any of this left over, do not put it back in the original container. You must throw it away according to EPA rules or they will come knocking at your door. Did I ever tell you what I think of the EPA? So now that the alcohol is dry, let's see what I can do here with it. I can't dip this. I would love to be able to dip it. and I'm sure I'll get streaks on this. I'm breathing hard. Can you hear me? Or am I telling you too much? And so on. Okay, it's all covered with bluing. I'm going to let it set for a couple minutes. Then I'm going over to the sink and run real hot water over it. And I did not do a good job of cleaning it up here. I suppose the bolt was in my way, so it's not going to be good right there. But good enough for who it's for. Can you see the unsightly color after it's been washed? Boy, there's a small hole in this can. I'll wipe that down real well and then dry it off. I'm trying to work fast in case that's what some of you call flash rust. I don't know. Try to get some oil down in there if I can. Yeah, they don't make Q-tips like they used to. All right. Doesn't look too bad right now. We'll see. Now I will reassemble for the very last time, and I'm going to use some Loctite, that's red Loctite, on the bottom screw and on this little set screw, and eventually on the handle here. I may not do that today, but I have to remove the oil in order for that to work. I believe it needs to be clean. Alright, and I'll do that off camera. Okay, there it is, and that's the prototype, which I didn't bother at this time to put any bluing on. Wasn't in the mood, I guess, is the reason. If you want drawings for these, remember, go back to part 1, and there's Tolly's email address for you. And I still have to put some Loctite on this handle. And I talked about that one other time. Remember that bluing, like paint, covers no imperfections. It only highlights them. So if you want a better finish than that, you need to surface grind it or polish it or whatever you need to do. That's just the mill finish of the steel, you recall, and I very lightly ran it over some number 500, but I'm not one to do much polishing, and that's good enough for me, and it's well oiled. It operates freely throughout its range. No binding. If you got binding, whoops, I didn't tighten the screw yet. Or put the Loctite on. No binding throughout its range, as I was saying. I didn't bother with bluing on that piece, or should I say I forgot. Oh well. Put your name and date on it if you're in the mood, although when you stamp your name in there, it does raise some surfaces, so it will no longer lay flat. I hope you enjoyed this build, and be sure and watch the Bell Center Punch build, which will be the next project coming up in January of 2017, I hope, if I'm still kicking. Thanks for watching all of these long videos. Please keep watching. Make favorable comments if you will. Remember, I can't answer all the comments or questions. It is very helpful if you answer each other's questions in the comments if you can, and do it kindly, please. And also, let me mention again, it is very helpful to me if you occasionally, perhaps once a month, click on a commercial that comes on my channel. and Google throws a few drachma my way to help support what I'm doing. Thank you ever so much for watching. This is tubalcain saying so long for now.